April 2022, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet is on patrol right off the Ukrainian coast. The cruiser Moskva, one of the most powerful warships in the region, armed to the teeth with air defense systems, long-range missiles, a very good radar, a crew of over 500 men, a floating fortress that could manage aircraft, strike targets hundreds of kilometers away, and theoretically hold an entire coastline at risk. On paper, it was untouchable. Within hours of being located, it was hit. It was burned, and then it was sank. What shocked military analysts wasn't just the loss of a warship, it was how it happened. Ukraine, a country with virtually no navy, had managed to locate, track, identify, target, and strike one of Russia's most powerful surface combatants. Not with a fleet, not with any air superiority, with information, with coordination, with a network. The lesson was brutal and immediate. Seeing matters more than shooting. Information matters more than firepower. And a warship fighting alone is already losing. So here's what I want you to think about today. Pakistan is spending some serious money on what may be the most significant aircraft the Pakistan Navy has ever operated. It is called the Sea Sultan or Sea Sultan. It is a long-range maritime patrol aircraft, and it is unlike anything Pakistan has fielded at sea ever. A jet-powered, sensor-laden, network-connected artificial intelligence machine designed to watch an entire ocean and share everything it sees instantly with every ship, every submarine, and every command center in the entire fleet. Is that investment justified for an economically struggling Pakistan? Or is it an expensive distraction? Pakistan has been operating the P-3C Orion for decades. So what happens to those aircraft now? And is the Sea Sultan here to replace them or do something far more ambitious? What does Pakistan's full naval arm actually look like? What does Pakistan's full naval air arm look like? The helicopters, the medium-range aircraft, the drones, and how all of this is transforming. And is Pakistan quietly building something far more important than just new platforms? A network that could connect every sensor, every weapon, and every operator across the Arabian Sea into a single, coordinated, lethal whole. Stay with me. This one goes deep. My name is Qasim, and you're watching Radar Mode on Pakistan Connect. Today's episode is about something that doesn't nearly get enough attention. Not because it's not important, because it is not easy to photograph. You can't point to it on a parade ground. You cannot see that, oh, this is the object we're talking about. However, this may be the single most consequential transformation the Pakistan Navy has undergone in decades. We're talking about the shift from a collection of various platforms to something far more powerful. A network. A coordinated, integrated, real-time system where every sensor feeds every weapon, where information moves at the speed of a decision, and where the whole becomes far greater than the sum of its parts. At the center of this transformation is Pakistan's most advanced maritime aircraft, the Sea Sultan. Pakistan's long-range maritime patrol aircraft, a jet-powered, multi-sensor, network-integrated platform that is not just the most capable aircraft Pakistan Navy has ever fielded, it is a statement about the kind of Navy Pakistan intends to be. But before we get there, let's start where the story actually begins. To understand why the Sea Sultan matters, you need to understand what came before it. This is not just a procurement story. It is a story of hard lessons, painful gaps, and a Navy that learned, sometimes the hard way, that the sea cannot be left unguarded. When Pakistan came into being on the 14th of August 1947, its Navy inherited a modest collection of sloops, minesweepers, and harbor launches from the partition of Royal Indian Navy, and Pakistan got a very small, tiny slice of it. What it did not receive was any meaningful capability to watch the sea from the air. The focus in those early years was survival, building a fleet, establishing a command structure, training sailors from scratch. Maritime patrol aviation was a luxury a newly born Navy could not afford. Through the 1950s and 60s, the Pakistan Navy developed without a dedicated air arm. Whatever surveillance existed was borrowed from the Air Force, from the Allied advisors, and from whatever could be pressed into service. The sea around Pakistan remained, for the most part, unseen. The 1971 catastrophe, the lesson that was written in fire. If the 1965 war with India planted a seed, 1971 watered it with a devastating lesson. On the night of the 4th and the 5th of December 1971, the Indian Navy launched Operation Trident, a missile boat attack on Karachi harbour. 3 Vidyut-class missile boats crept up the Pakistani coastline under cover of darkness. A Pakistani destroyer was sunk, a minesweeper went down, a cargo ship carrying ammunition was destroyed, fuel storage tanks at Karachi exploded and burned for days. A second attack, Operation Python, followed 4 nights later, striking again at Karachi's fuel infrastructure. Pakistan's naval headquarters had received radar warnings. Those warnings were misread. There was some confusion whether the missiles were being fired or were these aircraft that were coming in. The Indian missile boats came, struck, and withdrew mostly undetected. The Pakistan Navy particularly lacked an air reconnaissance capability, which is about monitoring, surveilling, and conducting reconnaissance missions over sea. And that absence proved a decisive factor. There were no aircraft overhead, no eyes on the sea approaches. Pakistan's ships were sitting targets for an adversary that planned carefully, moved cleverly, and struck without warning. It was a lesson the Pakistan Navy could never forget, and it never did. In the immediate chaos, the Navy did what it could. A Fokker F-27, a civilian turboprop. When I say turboprop, I mean aircraft which have when I say turboprop, I mean propeller-based engines, not the jet engines. Of course, you see the pankhas moving like in the C-130, for example. So the Pakistan Navy borrowed some Fokker 27s from the Pakistan International Airlines, the PIA, and they were pressed into emergency service, with PIA pilots volunteering to carry naval observers on reconnaissance sorties. It was improvised and inadequate, but it pointed towards something urgent. Pakistan needed its own eyes in the sky over the Arabian Sea. After the 1971 war, Pakistan committed seriously to building a naval air arm for the first time. In 1973, talks began with France to acquire the Breguet Atlantique, a purpose-built maritime patrol aircraft with long endurance, radar, sonar buoys, and submarine hunting capabilities. On the 26th of September 1975, PNS Mehran was formally commissioned as Pakistan's first dedicated naval arms station. The first anti-submarine warfare squadron, the 29th Squadron, was established in 1976 with 3 Atlantiques, then Sea King helicopters, and then Alouette-3 helicopters soon joined that arm. In 1982, Pakistan added 7 Fokker F-27s to the inventory as proper military platforms, forming the 27th Squadron for shorter range coastal patrols. After almost 3 decades of flying blind, the Navy finally had opened its eyes. The 3 Atlantiques served through turbulent years during the Kargil conflict of 1999. One of them was shot down by an Indian Air Force MiG-21 over the Run of Kutch, killing all 16 personnel on board, a reminder that maritime patrol is never a risk-free business. The surviving 2 soldiered on until the type was finally retired in September 2012, after nearly 4 decades of dedicated Pakistani service. By the late 1980s, Pakistan had identified the P-3C Orion as a natural successor to the Atlantique. Orders were placed through American foreign military sales, and then came the Pressler Amendments. US sanctions imposed in 1990 over Pakistan's nuclear program. The aircraft already paid for, withheld. For nearly a decade, the Navy made do with aging Atlantiques and shorter range Fokkers while the threat environment evolved constantly around them. In 1996, nearly a decade late, 3 P-3C Orions were finally inducted into the 28th Squadron. More followed over the years. Pakistan had waited a long time for these, and they were worth it. Now, P-3C Orion is a 4-engine turboprop that was the backbone of maritime patrol aviation in the US Navy and dozens of allied fleets for decades. Now, I want you to understand the difference between patrol aircrafts and their engine technologies. Now, there's two broad categories of engines that they use, and they play in a very important role in their capabilities. The turboprops, like the C-130 or the Atlantique or even the P-3C Orion, they have propeller-based engines, so they have longer endurances, they have shorter ranges, they cannot go to higher altitudes, but they can conduct their operations, they're very rugged, and they can conduct themselves for a long time, compared to jet engines, who need refueling, who burn the fuel at a much faster rate. But jet engines have a greater range, they have greater endurance, and also they're much faster, and they can go up to really high altitudes. In surveillance, the higher up you are, the more difficult it is to track you or to see you. So Pakistan, with the Sea Sultan, was the first time it shifted its gears from propeller-based engines to jet engines. The Orion was built to hunt subs or submarines. It also carried the Harpoon anti-ship missile in Pakistan service, making it a genuine threat to any surface ship from the Arabian Sea to the Strait of Hormuz. Pakistan expanded and upgraded its fleet over the years, reaching around 10 aircraft at its peak. The 7 Fokker F-27s, meanwhile, continued their coastal patrol role alongside the Orions until all 7 were retired in a ceremony in January 2020. Then came May 2011. Pakistani Taliban militants infiltrated PNS Mehran, the same naval air station commissioned 36 years earlier as the foundation of Pakistan's air arm. In a brazen attack lasting 15 hours, 2 of Pakistan's P-3C Orions were destroyed on ground with RPGs. It was one of the most damaging strikes on Pakistan's military infrastructure in the country's history. The Navy rebuilt and reacquired, but the mark was permanent on fleet size and on strategic thinking. A Navy whose primary patrol aircraft could be destroyed in the ground attack needed to think differently about resilience and the future shape of its aviation arm. By the time the Sea Sultan program launched, Pakistan's remaining Orion fleet stood around 6 aircraft. But they're still aging designs from the 1960s. However, upgraded, not built for the kind of real-time networked operations that modern maritime warfare demands. The Orions collected information and reported back. The world has moved on to sharing that information instantly across an entire fleet. The Orions served Pakistan well, as did the Atlantique before that, and the borrowed Fokkers before that. Each was the best Pakistan could field in that era. Each eventually reached its limits. The Sea Sultan is the next step. And if this history tells us anything, it is that Pakistan has been building towards this moment for 50 years. The Sea Sultan, the full picture of this aircraft is more impressive than anything you will have read in a headline. The Sea Sultan is Pakistan's LRMPA, a long-range maritime patrol aircraft. The emphasis on long range is deliberate. Range is what separates a platform that monitors the coast from a platform that owns the ocean. It is Pakistan's answer to India's P-8I Poseidon, a jet-powered, fully networked, multi-mission aerial intelligence system capable of operating across the full breadth of the Arabian Sea and beyond. The Sea Sultan is officially the replacement of the P-3C Orion fleet. Pakistan plans to field about 10 aircraft to have already been delivered, with 8 more on order, assigned to 28th Squadron of the PNS. It is stationed at PNS Mehran alongside the remaining 6 Orions until transition is complete. In organizational terms, that is a direct generational handover. But call it a replacement and you are dramatically underselling it. The P-3C Orion was a self-contained platform. It went out, searched, found, reported, and if necessary, it took some action, largely independently. The information it gathered stayed on the aircraft until it landed and was relayed by radio. Delays, gaps, a picture always slightly out of date by the time anyone sees it. That's how the Orions worked. The Sea Sultan is built for a completely different concept. It is not a newer aircraft doing the same job. It is a different kind of asset. One whose defining characteristic is not what it can see, but what it does with that, what it does see, and how instantly it shares that across the entire fleet. And this is where things get genuinely exciting. The Sea Sultan is built on the Embraer lineage 1000E, a high-performance twin-engined regional jet converted for naval warfare by Italy's Leonardo, South Africa's Paramount Group, and Aerosad. The first modified aircraft was inducted at PNS Mehran in September 2021 for crew training. Combat configured variants are being delivered in 2026. Why a business jet? Because the Embraer lineage 1000E brings something that purpose-built turboprops cannot match. It has a ferry range of over 4,000 nautical miles, a cruise speed of about 0.82 Mach, far faster than any propeller-based aircraft, meaning it reaches a crisis across the Arabian Sea in a fraction of the time. A service ceiling of 41,000 feet, giving its sensors a surveillance horizon measured in hundreds of kilometers. And a modern air support base, unlike dwindling spare parts ecosystem for aging turboprops. The sensor suite is where the real story lives. The Sea Sultan carries an active electronically scanned array radar, an ASA radar. Now you've seen these on F-32s, F-35s, all the latest and greatest of military aircraft. The same class of technology found on the world's most advanced fighters. It can sweep vast stretches of ocean, detect surface ships at extreme range, and identify submarines at periscope depth. Alongside, it has electro-optical and infrared turret which can read a ship's hull number from an altitude at which the aircraft is completely invisible and inaudible from below. Electronic support measures and electronic intelligence sensors passively detect, classify, and geolocate the radar emissions of any vessel or aircraft in the area without transmitting a single signal. The Sea Sultan can watch without ever being seen. It also carries sonobuoys and torpedoes for anti-submarine warfare and anti-ship missiles for surface warfare. This aircraft does not just watch the ocean, it can hunt everything in it. And then there's the piece that makes everything else transformative. Pakistan is integrating its domestically developed Ribat electronic support measures and the Link Green Tactical Data Link Protocol directly into the Sea Sultan's architecture. Link Green is Pakistan's own digital communications backbone. When the Sea Sultan detects a contact, it doesn't radio base and wait for instructions. It broadcasts automatically, continuously, simultaneously to every node, every vessel, every sub in the network. Every ship, every submarine, every command center, every other aircraft. The moment the Sea Sultan sees something, the entire fleet sees it. The kill chain is compressed from hours to seconds. That is not an upgrade. That is a transformation. The Orion was a hunter that reported back to the base. The Sea Sultan is the brain of a networked fleet. The Sea Sultan gets most of its attention, but it is not flying alone. Pakistan's maritime air picture has multiple layers, and understanding all of them is very essential. The RAS-72 Sea Eagle, the middle tier. While the Sea Sultan owns the deep ocean, the Pakistan Navy operates 5 RAS-72 Sea Eagle aircraft for medium-range coverage. Built on the ATR-72 commercial turboprop and converted by Germany's Rhineland Air Service, they replaced all 7 of the old Fokker F-27s and are a genuine capability step up. Multi-mode radar, electro-optical sensors, infrared sensors, electronic support measures, sonobuoys, and lightweight torpedoes under wing, with real-time satellite data links to shore-based command centers. Think of them as complementary tiers. The Sea Eagle covers the coastal zone, the exclusive economic zone, the approaches. Together, they leave no unobserved stretch where a ship or submarine could move undetected. Since fixed-wing aircraft or aircraft with wings cannot land on the ships that Pakistan is operating, that is where the helicopter force comes in, a dimension of maritime intelligence that too often gets overlooked. The most operationally significant shipborne helicopter in the fleet is the Z-9EC, a Chinese-built anti-submarine warfare helicopter derived from the French Dauphin design. Operating from the decks of frigates and surface combatants, it extends their sensor reach far beyond the ship's own radar. It carries a dipping sonar lowered into the water to listen for submarines. Along with search radar and anti-submarine torpedoes, Pakistan currently operates 6 of these, with option for more in the future. One limitation being that 8 new surface combatants have entered service, more ships than available helicopters to fill their hangars. Pakistan also maintains around 23 Westland Sea King helicopters in the 111 Squadron, serving anti-submarine warfare, search and rescue operations, and troop transport roles. 3 Sea Lynx helicopters, Pakistan's compact shipborne anti-submarine helicopters. 7 Alouette-III light utility helicopters round out the rotary wing picture in the 333 Squadron. And then comes the part of the story almost nobody outside the defense circles is discussing, and maybe the most consequential development of all. Pakistan's indigenously developed Shahpar-III, a medium altitude, long endurance, unmanned combat aerial vehicle developed by NESCOM, has a naval maritime variant which was revealed at the PIMEC 2025 Defense Exhibition, configured with synthetic aperture radar and electronic intelligence suite, sonobuoy pods, and lightweight torpedoes. A drone that can independently conduct anti-submarine patrols for 30 to 40 hours without crew fatigue, continuously feeding its sensor picture into the same framework that the Sea Sultan and frigates and all are connected to. Pakistan is also developing unmanned underwater vehicles for subsurface mapping and detection. In January 2026, the Pakistan Navy tested a loitering munition, a strike drone, against surface targets in live firing exercises in the North of Arabian Sea. The unmanned strike layer is not theoretical, it is operational. What is network-centric warfare? I have been talking about this since so long. It gets used constantly and gets explained the least. So I'll just simplify it for you. Imagine if you're playing chess, okay, but your opponent, the person you're playing the chess against, can see the entire board, okay, but you can only see the piece that you're moving. That is the difference between a networked force and an isolated force. The side with the full picture of the chessboard or the battle space is fundamentally a different reality. Traditional naval warfare was platform-centric. Each ship, submarine, and aircraft operated largely on its own picture. It was incomplete, delayed, and often wrong. Network-centric warfare changes everything. A patrol aircraft 500 kilometers from a fleet detects a submarine, shares that information instantly with a frigate, which cues a helicopter, which feeds data to a shore-based command center, authorizing an engagement. Within seconds, no single platform does everything. Every platform benefits from what the other platform is seeing. This is how advanced navies operate today. India's P-8I Poseidon is an explicitly designed networked node integrated with satellites, surface ships, and shore facilities to build a continuous picture of the entire Indian Ocean. That is the direct reference point for understanding what Pakistan is building the Sea Sultan to counter. Let's be honest about the trade-off. Every rupee spent on maritime patrol aircraft is a rupee not spent elsewhere. That tension is real. But the question is not whether Pakistan can afford to defend itself. It is whether it can afford not to, and whether these specific investments represent genuine strategic value. India is not standing still. Its navy operates aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and with the P-8I Poseidon, with deepened maritime partnerships with the United States, France, and Israel. In a conflict scenario, India's military voices have since long talked about imposing a naval blockade on Pakistan's coastline, cutting off trade, energy, and economic lifelines without firing a single conventional shot. Of course, we understand that in the Indian Navy, there are major gaps in operational readiness, import timelines, and acquisition delays. But the Indian Navy is on paper still one of the largest blue water navies in the world. Pakistan cannot match India platform for platform. What it can do and what it has clearly decided to do is to build smart. Network-centric capability is by measure of strategic leverage per rupee. Network-centric capability is by measure of leverage per rupee, one of the most cost-effective investments a small navy can make. You do not need numerical parity if you can see everything your adversary is doing and respond faster than they can adapt. Something of the sort you saw in the May 2025 conflict with India. And the procurement structure itself reflects the pragmatism. The Sea Sultan converts a business jet rather than developing a bespoke military aircraft. The Arabian Sea is one of the most strategically significant bodies of water on the planet. Pakistan's trade, energy, and export revenue flows through it. Gwadar, the seaward end of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the CPEC, sits directly on its coast. Pakistan's answer to the threat it faces is not parity in numbers, it is superiority in awareness. Picture the network in operation. A Shahpar-III maritime drone has been on station for 18 hours. It detects an anomalous contact and a sonar buoy hit, which means the sonar buoy dropped in the water makes some connection with an object inside the water. That information flows instantly to the Sea Sultan, which classifies and tracks. The Sea Sultan's picture flows to a Thorel-class frigate, which tasks the Z-9EC helicopter to close in with its tipping sonar. A Hangor-class submarine operating silently below repositions. The shore-based command center has complete picture and can authorize response. No single platform did that alone. Every node contributed, and that is the network as designed. For an Indian naval commander, that changes that calculation entirely. Moving against a fragmented platform-centric force is one thing. Moving against a force where awareness is persistent, distributed, and difficult to deceive, where even a drone you might dismiss is quietly feeding your position into a network that has already repositioned its assets. That is something completely separate. That is real deterrence. Not through matching firepower, but through denying surprise. Pakistan's doctrinal shift is readable in the hardware being commissioned. The Thorel-class frigates, procured from China, equipped with phased array radars, vertical launch missiles, the Z-9 helicopters, and the data link capability, network nodes, the Hangor-class submarines, air-independent propulsion systems, and communication and architecture redesigned to feed their underwater picture into the wider network. The Babar and the Khyber-class corvettes from Turkey, sensor suites, and link green compatibility, the long-range aerial brain of the network, the platform that sees the farthest, shares the fastest, and makes every other node more lethal than it could be alone. The Shahpar-III maritime drone providing persistent unmanned coverage, shore-based command centers receiving data from all of this simultaneously. None of this is coincidental. Each platform was selected and configured to contribute a common operational picture. This doctrine being implemented is clear. Information superiority in the Northern Arabian Sea is Pakistan's primary maritime objective for the coming decade. Not the biggest fleet, not the most missiles, the best picture and the fastest kill chain. The Red Sea crisis, ongoing since 2023, has validated exactly this. American destroyers, European warships, carrier strike groups operating against non-state actors using drones and anti-ship missiles in a confined body of water. The recurring challenge? Not missiles, but information. The navies that struggled the most had invested in expensive platforms without fully networking them. Pakistan is building its architecture while those lessons are still fresh. That is an advantage. Now let's bring it back to where we started. The Moskva did not sink because Russia lacked firepower. It sank because it lacked awareness. It couldn't see the full picture fast enough to respond to the network being used against it. Pakistan has been on its own journey towards that understanding for 50 years. The borrowed Fokker F-27 from the PIA, the Atlantique in 1976, the long wait through the Pressler years, the P-3C Orion finally arriving in 1996, and then the heartbreak of PNS Mehran in 2011. Each era was the best Pakistan could field at the time. Each eventually reached its limits, and each pointed forward to something better. The Sea Sultan is not just the next aircraft. It is Pakistan's most capable airborne platform ever. A jet-powered, long-range maritime patrol aircraft that sees the farthest, reaches the deepest, and shares everything it knows instantly with the entire fleet. Together with the Sea Eagle's coastal coverage, the Z-9EC and the Sea King helicopters operating from ship decks, the Shahpar-III drone providing tireless unmanned persistence, and the frigates, corvettes, and submarines all plugged into the same network, protected by the Green Link. That is an aviation architecture that is becoming progressively harder to operate against undetected. Is the cost justified for an economically struggling Pakistan? Given the alternative aging turboprops, a helicopter gap, and vast stretches of Arabian Sea unobserved, the harder question is, what would Pakistan pay in strategic terms for the cost of falling behind? Pakistan is not buying a fleet, it is buying a doctrine. It is buying persistent maritime awareness across waters that matters most to its security and survival. This is not extravagance, this is strategy. I would need all of you to watch the Arabian Sea very closely. The most important things happening there right now are not visible on the surface. That's all from Radar Mode this week. If this episode gave you a clearer picture on what Pakistan is building, what it's replacing, and why it matters, then we did our job. Now I need something from you. Like this video, it tells us this kind of analysis is worth making more of. Subscribe to Pakistan Connect so you never miss an episode. Share this with someone who should be paying attention. And comment below, tell us what you think, what we missed, or what we want covered in the next. I read all your comments, so please feel free to comment. My name is Qasim, and this has been Radar Mode. Stay informed, stay sharp, and I'll see you again next week.